You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
All right, what's good, everybody? Happy Friday. It's the Friday the 13th edition, so I was not very surprised that we'd have some doom and gloom to talk about when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Presented by Bet365. This is the Friday edition again of Leafs Morning Take. Nick Alberga and special guest co-host Frank Corrado. Welcome, buddy. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey, this is fantastic stuff. I'm loving this. First time ever. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION, all in uppercase, NATIN. Today, our Super Chat charity partner this season is Sick Kids. You want to make sure your question or comment gets on the show. Hit us up with a Super Chat. Proceeds from our Super Chat will go to Sick Kids, Canada's first children's hospital, and a top research-intensive children's hospital in Canada and third in the world. We got Frank Corrado in the chair today, so I'm sure you guys got questions as well. But what's going on, Frankie? How are you, bud?
Not much, buddy. I'm good. I was in Montreal last night calling the Habs versus Penguins. That was crazy. Penn scored 6 goals in the third period. And I saw you're active on Twitter, always interacting with interacting with some French TV media broadcast sites. You're everywhere.
So the backstory on this, as you know, Frankie, I'm born in Montreal, so I have a lot of family in Montreal who are big-time Montreal Canadiens fans. And granted, Leafs fans are just as guilty as you know. The way this fan base spoke about Lane Hutson, you thought Bobby Orr was joining the Montreal Canadiens. So whenever a shift comes out, this is hilarious. They put out a shift on social media. He didn't even pick up a point. He skated the perimeter of the ice. I see Mitch Marner do that every Stanley Cup playoffs. I don't know what the difference is. All I did was respond, when is Lane Hutson going to become a winger? That's all I did.
Yeah, I see you. I see you out there. Yeah, I mean, listen, we're not going to get into Habs talk on Leafs Morning Take, but he's very talented, and every once in a while you try and pull up some numbers to see like where he's at in comparison to the other D-men in the NHL, and it's always these things like he's top 5 or top 3, and it's like who's ahead of him? Hughes, Makar, Fox. Like there's pretty short list of guys, so hopefully it comes around for him as far as scoring a goal. But the points are there, and that got ugly last night. But good thing it didn't get ugly in Toronto against the Anaheim Ducks. Although the only thing you thought was ugly was the jerseys that the Ducks were wearing.
Oh, and this comes from a guy who I love the Mighty Ducks trilogy. In fact, I have a Mighty Ducks D2 poster on my condo here in Toronto. Like that's how much I love the Mighty Ducks. Like just go to the District 5 jerseys and call it a day. I too much orange, man. Like you're a guy who played in the league. Would you want to wear orange pants?
It's a lot of orange. I'm probably in the minority of people that actually don't mind the jerseys. I don't know. I feel like it's very like Orange County, like it's different. I don't know if you've ever been down there. It's just like people dress different, they act different, and the Ducks jersey somewhat reflects that. But it's better than what they had. I still will stand by that for sure.
The irony is that everybody's miserable in that Anaheim Ducks team. I could tell you that firsthand. So they suck. They stunk last night. They stunk in Montreal. They stunk in Ottawa. And it's the same old same for that team. They're like the Detroit Red Wings of the Western Conference. It's Pat Verbeek there. It's Steve Yzerman here. Samurai writes in, 2 mafiosos hosting the show. But this guy likes pistachio panettone. I can't support that, man.
Yeah, no, I'm not a big panettone guy, but if I'm gonna have one, I need the pistachio cream in the middle, or else I flat out refuse. Let's give a little shout out though. Among many things that aren't going right for the Ducks, my former teammate Rich Clune is now the assistant coach there, and he's running the power play. And you gotta love when you know the guy who's running the power play, and they get a power play goal in the Mecca. Like if anything happens in the center of the hockey universe, like people hear about it. So I was happy for him when the Ducks got that power play goal. I think it was Vetrano last night.
Hey, shout out to Rich Clune because he's getting more power play goals than the Maple Leafs are these days, man. They're just back to just being garbage. 2 for the last 16 since Austin Matthews came back in the lineup. But we don't want to bury the lead here on Leafs Morning Take. And Frankie, great to have you with you here on this Friday the 13th edition. Anthony Stolarz goes down. Dennis Hildeby has already been recalled after the game. Craig Berube didn't have much of an update. I'm sure we'll find out more today. But when you see that happen, what comes to mind?
Well, for sure, there's a certain level of concern just because he's been playing so well. But this was always going to be part of the challenge with Anthony Stolarz is that he hasn't been able to build up a big workload throughout the course of his career. He has been injured at times, and this is not to say it's expected, but I'm not surprised that this happened, especially considering the fact that like he had to eat up a big chunk of games while Wall was hurt. And then, it's not back to back nights per se, but it's back to back games for him coming off a game where he got peppered in New Jersey. And you know what? You just hope he's not out too long. And I guess the thing now you look at is okay, with Joseph Wall, I don't question the ability or the capability for him to, take on this workload while Stolarz is out. The only thing that worries me is like, is there an injury around the corner for him? And are both guys potentially going to be out because now he's going to have the same workload that Stolarz had while Wool was hurt?
Forgot to mention too, Matt Murray hurt on Saturday. Well, what timeliness around that, and that's why Hildeby is the guy, because this would not be a perfect opportunity for Matt Murray to be recalled, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Like if you're looking at organizational depth and you want someone who, you feel like you can trust because he's been in the league a lot and he's had success like this. Yeah, it might have been Matt Murray time, but it sounds like Hildeby is the one getting called up, and that's okay. Like I think, with this is a good opportunity for the Leafs to kind of look at the way they've deployed their goalies this year and say, let's not hesitate to put Hildeby in the net. Like he's gonna have to play at some point, and it might not be the same kind of schedule that you had with Woll and Stolarz. Like, yeah, Woll's going to pick up more games, but it doesn't have to be Joseph Woll every single night. And if it is, like, you might be asking for trouble, which would be ill advised.
Do you think we've almost conditioned ourselves in this market? Anytime a goalie goes down, it's like doom or gloom. Like, you even watched the panel last night. They're like talking about previous knee injuries. His career almost ended. Is that just because of this market, do you think? Because, like, right away, I felt the same way. I'm like, oh, man, like, here we go again. We can't have nice things in this market, but it feels that way sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know why I mean, we're just so I feel like so passionate about the team. And when something bad happens, it just that cuts deep. And when something good happens, it's, hey, it's our year. Like we really ride the roller coaster here in Toronto. And goaltending is part of that because like ask yourself this, how many times have you talked to people and they've just longed for like the number one stud goalie, right? And how many years have we, not necessarily had that? And it's like, here's the patchwork goalie here, here's this guy who's trying to find it, and now you have a guy who's putting together a season that, the numbers would tell you that's as good as it gets. And then he gets hurt and you're like, here we go again. Like I think that's the biggest emotion people will say, here we go again. We can't have nice things, and we finally have like this, rock star goaltender, and he gets hurt. Like this is so typical of us.
Do you think this team needs to go out there and obtain somebody? Again, we don't have like a status update. We don't know if it's day to day. We don't know if it's week to week. I know Craig Berube saying after the game we'll find out more tomorrow. They're not gonna disclose anything. This is the Maple Leafs, right? They said Austin
No.
Matthews is gonna be out for day to day, and he was out for 9 games and did a trip to Germany. So you just never know what can transpire in this market. But do they have enough depth is the question, I think, right now. Like, I even thought about the possibility of reuniting with James Reimer. He's like a third stringer pretty much with Buffalo. I know Devin Levi's back in the AHL, but he's been really, really good. Maybe Buffalo recalls him. Maybe Reimer goes back on waivers. Do you think this is something they have to address, Frankie?
No, I don't think so. I think first you have to know the severity of the Stolarz injury, but like if you're gonna go out and use a roster spot or spend an asset, I know waivers is a different story, but you still have to pick up a raw or a contract against the 50. Um, is it worth it? Like hopefully Wool stays healthy. I don't doubt that he can play. We're not sure, like just because Murray's with the Marlies, we're never really gonna know what the injury is and how long that would be. But I don't think this is something where you need to go out and make a snap decision. Like I always think you got to see what you got first, kind of weather that storm. And then if you get to the point where you kind of decide, okay, like this is, we still have a little time here before everyone comes back and we're healthy and it's not working, you can make something happen pretty quick. Like if the price is right, it can be one or two phone calls away. So I don't think this is something you need to try and get ahead of because It's just not. It's not this would not be a high urgency, high priority thing for me.
Everyone's day to day, by the way, pardon the drilling if you hear that in the background. I think they're building a tunnel to China here in the railway behind me in Liberty Village. So there's not much I can do in that front. But I can tell you about the first ever TLN Nation vacation. Join us in Music City from Thursday, March 20th to Sunday, March 23rd, 2025 for the first ever TLN Nation vacation, from live podcasts, winery tours to taking in the Toronto-Nashville game at Bridgestone Arena. This promises to be the trip of a lifetime. We're offering two packages, one with flights, $24.50 plus tax, and one without, $12.99 plus tax. For more information on how to book, head on over to nationgear.ca or check out the link in our show bio. Life's too short for ordinary vacations. What's it like to play an NHL game at Bridgestone Arena, Frankie?
It's fun. I mean, it's gotten more fun since I've been in the league, but I think Nashville's just got such a good buzz, anyways, and like they've really built something up there with the fans and the crowd where it's pretty unique, right? Like they have some chants, some sayings. It's a good experience playing there, and when they're a good team, it's different than what they have going now. I feel for the fans there because everyone bought into the hype around that team, and this was the year they went out and got some, big name players, some goal scorers, spent some money. It's not something they typically do, and it's just not working for them. So, yeah, it'll still be a fun place to watch a game, fun place to play.
Trust me when I tell you this, I will be taking a peek on Lower Broadway a couple times on that trip.
Everyone takes a peek there for sure.
It's going to be a very, very long peek, but looking forward to that trip. Looking forward to our nation citizens being along with us. Make sure to get those super chats again in support of Sick Kits at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And again, don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. So let's dive into this 3-2 victory. Again, I didn't want to bury the lead because I think that was the big story from the game, aside from Max Pacioretty, which we'll get to in minutes and moments. But obviously the Stolarz injury. First and foremost, I think you have to credit Joseph Woll for coming in. Like, that's a really difficult position as a goaltender to come in after the first period where you're channeled. Your mind's not really in the game, you would have to think. And to put yourself in purpose there in the second period, I thought Woll did a good job in relief.
Yeah, and I think that's always, when you have a goalie who's coming in cold and a guy who's been, who has the injury history of him, like there's probably a little worry there that like, hey man, like, I hope everything goes well here. But yeah, his game has been so consistent and solidified. And then last night, of course, the Ducks don't generate a ton. And Toronto's been a much better defensive team for the most part this season. So, give him a lot of credit for jumping into a tough situation there. And the thing is, he comes in cold-ish, right? Like he didn't have to jump right in, in the middle of a period. So he probably got the intermission to at least warm up a little bit. So that's, that puts him in a better spot as far as jumping into a game like that.
Definitely. And I think when you look at this one, it's one of those where it wasn't a Picasso, but that's been the story with this Maple Leafs team throughout this season. They did their thing. It's, another consistent, heavy effort. You knew Anaheim was going to be a bit better after they were shelled in Ottawa on Wednesday. But they got the 2 points. And maybe you can speak to this as well, just the lull over a team when the guy who's been playing so magnificent goes down. I know you have a lot of respect and you feel great about Joseph Woll, but whenever a teammate goes down, you sort of, it's in your mind, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like if someone goes down, you think about it for a sec, and then it's just like you got to get back going. Like it's almost like we're going to think about that after the game because everyone's just kind of in their own zone. The biggest thing for a goalie coming in, I always found, like, let's just try and make this as easy as possible for the guy coming in. It's not not an easy situation, but I always part of me always thinks too, like sometimes guys get thrust into situations where they weren't expecting to, and there's like no thinking involved. You just jump in. You kind of get out of your own way, get out of your own headspace that way. Like, if I was sitting for a while and then I'd play a game, I'd find I'd have like all day to think about it and kind of like play it over in my head. How's this going to work? How's that going to work? And you almost, you get in your own way. When there's no time, you just get in there, you play, and you're like, oh, hey, that actually felt pretty good. But yeah, I think with someone going down, you notice it, then you play the game, you're focused on that, and then you you kind of just go, see how your buddy's doing afterwards, and regroup the next day of practice.
In support of Sick Kids, Tony, thank you so much for the super chat. Ditto for Igor McJazz. 'Tis the season, says Igor. Really, really appreciate that, guys. And in support of a great cause, as mentioned. Max Pacioretty, Frankie, this is the big story last night, too. The Pacioretty, Tavares, and Nylander line reunited once again. They were outstanding. 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points. But most specifically, Pacioretty had 2-1, 3 shots on goal, 3 hits, his 61st career 2-goal game. Like, he was really, really strong. And I want to take you back to the summer. What was your initial reaction to the news coming out that the Leafs were sniffing around on Pacioretty?
Not surprised, because they needed someone lower in the lineup who could score. And I think if you looked at some of the guys that were available, like, Pacioretty was a guy, JVR was a guy, and you kind of think, okay, with what their, messaging is, who's going to fit more of a depth role that can do a lot of what they're saying. And JVR is a good player, good offensive instincts, but we've seen the physicality from Pacioretty, and him kind of using his size to his advantage. The goals last night are a good example of that, where, he's working through sticks or working through checks, getting sticks on shots. And it's like, okay, it makes sense that they went with Pacioretty because of, the frame that he has, the still, a good foot speed, although it's not exactly what it used to be. But I think he's asserted himself really well, where, he's kind of said, well, hey, if I'm not going to be scoring, I'm going to be physical, like he was in New Jersey. Like, we all saw the hit on Jack Hughes. And so, having that kind of versatility has really made Pacioretty a valuable player for this group, because we know depth scoring is so important and something they desperately need. But being able to have that little chippiness goes a long way with this group as well.
Well, that's been the bigger story for me, Frankie, in this early season, is how physical Max Pacioretty has been. Like, I've long loved this player. A lot of people know that on this podcast. I've been a big Pacioretty guy.
You're a
dating
Montreal
back.
guy. That's why.
Well, no, I don't really care about that. But he is the former captain of the Montreal Canadiens. I love them more in Vegas, quite honestly, now. But I just think when you look at him, the way he has evolved his game, and I thought it was pretty simple that maybe he's had that conversation with Berube, Tree Living, like, hey, this is the way we need you to play. If you don't want to play this way, that's fine. But if you want to stick with this team, this is the way you're going to play. Because I can't remember a time in Max Pacioretty's career he was this physical. But I think it was much needed, a power forward type presence with this Maple Leafs team. And again, he's gelling with the big boys, which is good news, because how often are we talking about like depth wingers with this organization, right?
For sure. Like, there's a lot of, there's options, but it feels like, as far as the depth wingers go, like, no one's really separated themselves from the pack. And you can even, like, say Matthew Nyes has not separated himself, the way we thought he was going to after a good start this season. So, yeah, I think, like, with Pacioretty, it's funny, like, guys get older and you want to stay in the league by any means necessary. And for a guy that's been through a lot in his career, whether it's the successful years or the injuries that have forced him to be out of the lineup and not available to play, you get a chance here, and you say to yourself, I'm going to do everything I possibly can. And you can read between the lines. Okay, what does this team need? Well, yeah, they got the elite talent for sure. He would know Toronto just as well as anyone else. Like, what does Toronto need, and what can I do, that really helps me fit in here? Well, hey, goal scoring is not going to be an issue for him. Like, that's something that's always been part of his game. But the recognition that he needs to have some energy and some chippiness, and make this team, harder to play against in the way that he can. That's good veteran recognition by him to kind of assert himself in that way. And I think there's probably some younger guys that would be well served to take a page out of his book and realize that. But you almost don't realize it until you get to that point where you're like, okay, this is it. Like, if I want to stick around, there's some things that I have to do here that might be different than what I've done in the past. And for me, Max Pacioretty has done that.
Yeah, he's definitely understood the assignment. And I said it early on in the season. I think he's better suited for the top 6 as opposed to the bottom 6 ever since they made that switch. It's been night and day, because if you recall, he was a health bomb early in the year, really trying to find his footing with this team, and comes up with a big effort against the Anaheim Ducks.
Funny,
And
Nick? Like, if you
Yeah.
go back to camp, remember, like, hey, just, he had the one good preseason game. I think it was right away. And then it was quiet for a bit. And then it was like, yeah, we got a guy like that has to ramp up, right? Like, he comes into camp on a PTO, and then, the contract's going to be there pretty much regardless of how he plays. You just got to stay healthy. And I remember Tree Living saying it, like, that's the kind of guy you just got to give a little runway to, because we know what he's all about. And sure enough, like, he's gotten the runway. He's been hurt. He's come back, and he's come back from injury, like, looking a little refreshed too. It feels like he took that time to not only, get back to normal health wise, but also just, it feels like there's a little, I don't know, there's a little extra something after he's come back from an injury, which is not an easy thing to do, because the game's moving faster. The league moves on without you, and you're trying to play catch up. So to not only play catch up, but come back with a little extra half gear, that speaks volumes to his commitment and dedication.
I love these stories too of a guy who's bounced around a bit the last couple years, had some really, really bad injuries, and found a way to battle back and battle through. And again, to join a team that he, played against for a lot of years in his career as sort of the enemy, to join them and really produce and contribute, I think has been a pleasant surprise. It reminds me a lot of, like, to an extent, the Yanni Hakanpää, or not the Hakanpää, excuse me, the Benoit pickup from last year, where I think you almost have to find value in a bit of free agency, whether it's late in free agency, early on in free agency. And maybe this year's Benoit is a guy like Max Pacioretty, who I think really wasn't on the radar of many Leafs fans, even when they signed the guy.
Yeah, no, that's fair for sure. Like, you always, are you guilty of this? Like, are you guilty of going back over the years and looking at, the teams that won the Stanley Cup, or the teams that do well, and you say, okay, what did they do at the deadline, or who did they sign in the offseason, or who were the guys, that were the other guys that really stepped up, right? Like, because I'm not a believer. I don't know how you feel. I'm not a believer that, like, oh, just the top guys, cancel each other out, and then, you need your third liners to win you a series. I'm like, then why don't the third liners win the Conn Smythe, right? Like, your best players have to be your best players. But if you get guys that are, depth guys or pickups that punch above their weight class for a certain period of time, I mean, that's the secret sauce right there. Best players being better than the other guys, and depth guys punching above their weight class. And I mean, like, if you can go, Tampa's a good example. How many times did they have third line guys, whether it was Goodrow or Coleman or Gord, or, there's examples of guys in Colorado too that were just, they played better than they probably are at the time. And there's some, savvy pickups that happen, and you need that. Not just because the top guys are going to cancel each other out. So, yeah, it's one of those ones that has the makings of that right now, if he can continue to play the way he has been playing.
Complimentary pieces, right? I often bring up Ivan Barbashev's name with Vegas and his importance to that team. Arturi Lehkonen, when he was dealt from Montreal to the Colorado Avalanche. And that's sort of the versatility and the type of player I think the Leafs should covet between now and the trade deadline. Again, it's Nick Alberga, Frankie Corrado, the Friday edition of Leafs Morning Take at the Leafs Nation 401. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. The beat goes on for Willie Nylander, man. I thought he was awesome. Awesome stuff again for Nylander, on pace for 51 goals this year. But just the way he's scoring, the way he's commanding the game, I couldn't believe it. But I think he's actually been better this year than he was in his contract year.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point for sure. Like, I don't know what we can say about Willie that hasn't been said already. But he's stronger than maybe you think. Like, he's willing to work through more than some people think, and he's a handful in so many ways. And um, Willie's been good with Tavares. He's been good with Pacioretty, and that helps out a lot, because you don't feel like, I said this on the Leaf panel, when Matthews and Marner got reunited. It's fine to reunite those guys. It's fine to move, those guys around the lineup if you want Matthews and Nylander, or Tavares and Marner, but you don't want to do it because you're forced to, because there's a pair that isn't working. And, for so long, it felt like maybe Tavares and Nylander was stagnant or stale. So you had to move Marner down. It feels like there's more consistency between those guys, so you can move them around because you want to, not because you have to. And Willie's kind of feeling like the Willie that we saw before the extension last year, and that's great news for the Leafs. And there's not a lot that Willie won't do right now for me. And his game's in a good place.
I think the biggest difference I've noticed from Nylander the last couple of years is like consistency. Like, yeah, every player is going to have a couple games in 82 where they're just not good by their standards, but every game, it seems like I've noticed Willie Nylander at some point in time. Remember a couple of years back, like that was the biggest knock on the guy. He'd go missing for games at a time or shifts at a time. I feel
Yeah,
like he's really brought that consistency and like, yeah, I thought he was a star a couple of years ago, but like this guy's a bona fide superstar. Like I put
yeah.
him on a shorter list than I ever have when I watch this guy in, night out. And maybe it's because Matthews is on the team, Marner's on the team. Like they have some really, really great players, but I don't think you can state it enough. The evolution of Willie Nylander's game from where he was even 5 years ago,
Even the optics of things with Willie, right? Like
man.
if he ever got going with the straight leg kind of, hey, I'm not quitting on the play, but my shift is actually over, and well, it's someone else's problem now. Like optically, it looked so bad, and it happened, and it didn't always lead to something bad happening, but you watched it and you're saying he's not exactly sharp or engaged or locked in, and like let's be honest, like that wasn't every night. That wasn't consistently for Willie. Like he's been very good for a long time now. But you know the variance of that is different now. It feels like there is a more of a competitive kind of edge to Willie's game. And I think a lot of that stems from he's tired of losing. Like he's tired of losing here. He wants to win. He said as much. If I played with Willie, like I got to see it when he was a young player. I think at that point it was more his um drive to want to be, a really good player, and eventually get himself to where he is now. But once you get there, what's the next step? Well, the next step is winning, and it's hard to do that. And you need your best guys to be the guys that really push the envelope in a lot of different ways. And I think Willie, like if you were just a guy on the Leafs, like me, I was just a guy. If I saw Willie on a day to day, my takeaway would be like this guy means business. He wants, like, he works every day before, after practice. The engine's going more than it ever has seemingly during the games. Like there's a lot to like about where Willie's at with his compete level, and his being engaged, and optically, like it looks very different than when we've seen the kind of down spells of Willie.
The thing that's not being spoken about enough either is like just sort of the impact of having his brother with him this year. And also to that point, like there hasn't been a drop off considering everything that's transpired in the last couple days. Like he's just gone about his business. I know you're a professional athlete and stuff like that, but when you're that close to your brother, he's your best friend. It's been a really up and down moment where you get to play with him in the NHL, but then he's put on waivers. Like I love the professionalism around Willie Nylander. Whereas, like you mentioned, and again, we're all guilty of this at a younger age. We just don't come off that way, at least. But I think
Yeah.
he's like the total package now. Like I can't commend the guy enough. Even the way he plays in the playoffs, I can deal with that a lot more than some of the other guys on this roster. And I just think the evolution of Willie Nylander has been just so fun to watch from where he was day one to where he is now. It's like night and day, dude.
Yeah, yeah. You know what, the brother thing, obviously, like, hey, I think it's a privilege to be able to do
Sure.
that kind of stuff, and give Alex credit because he put himself in that situation. He played well in Columbus last year, and he comes in on a AHL deal, and eventually earns an NHL deal. So that's really cool. That's a special thing for the family. I think whether it lasted 1 game or 10 games or 20 games, like there was always going to be that special kind of moment that you take away from it. The fact that it happened, I think everyone has a certain amount of satisfaction in that. And I don't think there would be any disappointment in the fact that it's not going to be a long-term thing, and I don't think anyone was expecting it to be a long-term thing. So I think Willie's first and foremost wants to win and wants to be a part of the group, or the main group of guys that deliver success in the playoffs here to Toronto, and that's top of mind more than anything else.
Frankie, speak for yourself. Producer Vic, when they signed Alex Nylander, he's like, "This is it for the year." They just know, like, there's no way you're going to drop him with his brother in town. Well, like 2 weeks later, they drop him. But yeah, it makes the most sense. It was best for business. It was a cool story. But you move on, and Nylander Willie's been fantastic. His 18th goal, 13th at home. He's on pace again for 51 goals. We're going to talk about him a bit coming up and Take It or Leaf It. So Jake McCabe comes back to the lineup, missed 5 games. I was there for it taking place in Tampa. Took the puck off the face, man. That's tough, but comes back. Oh, another solid effort, plays around 20 minutes, had an apple, 2 shots on goal, 1 block. Like he's the type of guy similar to Chris Tanev. The accolades aren't going to be there. The credit's not going to be there, but he is so rock steady. And that was such an underrated pickup, I think, from Chicago by Kyle Dubas a couple of years ago.
And you got them to eat half the salary too,
I know.
right? Like
Yeah.
think about how important that is for this team that's always up against the cap. And yeah, it addressed a lot of what the Leafs needed help with, but it always still felt like their quote unquote shutdown pairing was somewhat incomplete, right? Like Jake McCabe, it feels like, yeah, fit that. But whether it was with Benoit or Brody, it didn't feel right yet. Benoit's better suited lower in the lineup. TJ Brody, not exactly the guy that he, was when he was with the Calgary Flames or early in his tenure as a Toronto Maple Leaf. So now, we're the Chris Tanev, Jake McCabe thing is a legit shutdown pair. Like it really is in so many ways. And for me, McCabe, like I see a guy that's a little bit of a commander out there, like always communicating, kind of steering traffic in the right ways. And like having a guy that can command the ice that well defensively is so important. I think it calms everyone down when you're on the ice with him. And even for the best guys, like if they know they really have to push because you're down a goal, and I know, last night it's Anaheim, it's a different story, but like, if they know they have to push and they're on the ice with that guy, they feel more comfortable doing so because it's just there's a fire that could get put out if something happens. But like his importance is huge to this team. That goes without saying, and you can just see a difference in the way things are kind of conducted when he's on the ice.
Yeah, the interesting part about McCabe, too, if you recall early on in his career, played for the World Junior team, he was known as more of like an offensive presence. And I don't know if that's just the evolution of a player over time, but now he's just like defense first and he's rock steady. And again, I think you always have to credit players for evolving in the moment. I think it's difficult to speak to that and say to that when you're in the moment playing the game at the NHL level. But just like you talk about the versatility, he's more of like, he is a defensive guy now as opposed to like early on in his career. And we talk about this so many times with, like, for example, Nick Robertson was a sniper in the AHL or in the OHL, even the AHL, but
Yeah.
he hasn't been able to evolve at the NHL level. And I think McCabe deserves a lot of credit for that too.
Yeah, if you're a defenseman and you kind of break into pro hockey, NHL, AHL, and you think you're a guy who can, hey, I have good offensive instincts. You need to be great offensively in order to be the offensive guy in the NHL. Like every team or every good team seemingly has that one guy that's a level above, like go through all the top offensive defensemen on any team in the NHL. Like they are special. If you're not that special someone, you need to be well-rounded or rock solid defensively. And I think if you've looked at the way um, free agency has shaken out the last couple years, the guys who are rock solid, they're getting term and they're getting money. And the guys who are, good offensively but not great offensively, like they're not getting term. There's not a lot of trust factor attached to those guys because you can find guys that are, hey, I'm good offensively, but I don't know where you put me because you got your power play guy and you got guys that are better defensively. And I don't know if that's something like he would have realized in that kind of frame of mind or that view, but that's kind of how it's played out where you realize you're built to be solid and strong and defend well, and hey, if he can give you a few assists or whatever, like you'll take that kind of stuff. But it's first and foremost the defense that comes with him and the physicality, and that comes from just recognizing where the league is going and how you can cement your status in the league as best as possible.
Been an absolute monster. There's no question about it when it comes to the Maple Leafs blue line in a really, really good spot after this 3-2 victory against the Anaheim Ducks. Do you want to comment at all on this Maple Leafs power play? I mentioned the numbers earlier on, 2 for 16 since Matthews returned. They're running a 5 forward set on PP1. Again, they're out of answers. I can't play. You can't pin this on Mark Savard because how many dudes have had the opportunity to run this power play and
Oh,
haven't been
everyone's
successful?
had
It's
a
wild.
chance. Like
Yeah,
everyone's had a chance. Here's the thing about the five
yeah,
forwards. I hate it. I
me
hate the
too.
five forwards. As okay, not even just as a defenseman, okay, but as I'm almost obligated to hate it as a defenseman. But
True.
secondly, why do we pay defensemen $7 million or $4 million or all these millions of dollars? Why do we pay them that much money? So, like, yeah, just to play good D, sure. But they also like you pay guys good money on the back end so they can run the power play for you. Like, I just I don't get it, man. All like there's defensemen on the Leafs that have run power plays for their whole careers, at every level. I just the five forwards thing, it seems like it's a little forced. And it seems unnatural. Like playing the point at at the top of the power play is not like, yeah, I'm just going to try it out. It's not like going from the bumper to the half wall or going from the front of the net to the bumper. No, it's like something that you build up over years and years and years and you perfect. And it's like everyone runs it a little bit differently. Everyone has their certain characteristics. And um I just that's a generic kind of thing for me, but I don't like the five forward look and I never really have.
To me, it screams desperation. It screams, I have no answers. Honestly,
Oh
like
yeah.
right? Like that's
Yeah.
all it is.
You're 100% right. And the power play was going well for a while, and now it's not. And I think when the power play is not going well, that's the time where everyone just kind of regroups and says, "Let's build it back up," and it just becomes simple again. And it comes elementary and it's basic and it's boring. And you may leave the power play meeting thinking, this guy thinks we're stooges, and we're not. And we're more skilled than that. But guess what? If you can't score, like you can't get into the complexities of a power play unless you're doing the basic things very, very well. And if you're not doing the basic things very well, there's a good chance you're not having success on the power play. So that's usually the button you press. And then the next button you press is five forwards on the power play. So it's hard to wrap your head around with all that skill, especially with all that skill, Nick, and like all those areas. Marner, great passer. Matthews, great shooter. Nylander, great shooter. Tavares, great in front of the net. Like everyone's in the right spots. Like just how does it not like? How do you wrap your head around how it doesn't work?
It is one of the most baffling things I think in this market in recent memory, where you have that much star power and you can't get cooking on the power play. But again, they've got what 53 games to figure this out in time for the Stanley Cup playoffs. Like you need those power play goals in the Stanley Cup playoffs to ignite you, to lift you, and hopefully that happens for this Maple Leafs team. But yeah, again, they're not in a good way when it comes to the power play right now. Any thoughts on the weekend? They got a back to back visiting Detroit on Saturday night, the second of four meetings. The first took place on November 8th, a 3-1 Maple Leafs win. The Red Wings are in a bad way right now. They dropped 6 of 7. I think Derek Lalonde's job could be on the line in that game. And then home to Buffalo, a rare Sunday night game at 5 Eastern time, which is really, really bizarre. But I think there's a chance, obviously, we see Dennis Hilda be in one of these two games. When would you play him?
I would have him at the home game against the Sabres. Just let's not complicate things, right? Like it's the second half of a back to back. It's on home ice. That's a no brainer for me. But you're playing two games against teams that are not in a good way, like you mentioned. The Red Wings are a puzzling team. Like it's hard to get a gauge on what they are. They're not overly fast, not overly skilled, not overly physical. They're pretty leaky. Their goaltending has had issues, especially when Husso's in net. So like there's plenty of vulnerability there for the Leafs to take advantage of that. And I mean the Sabres are well documented, right? Like they're also in a bad way. The fans are bringing palm trees to the games. They can't close out a lead. They're not getting much from their second line onward. There's just it feels like if you're reading stuff out of Buffalo, like there's issues on the back end. Owen Powers struggling. Like there's so much going wrong with the Sabres. Like if they didn't have this Luukkonen in net, like they'd be way worse. Like he saved them on a number of nights. So this weekend is a back to back. against two teams where it's like a mandatory 4 points. If you leave points on the table against these two teams, like that's when you start to wonder, okay, I think the game you play in New Jersey and the game against Washington and the game against Pittsburgh, those aren't blips anymore. Like we're kind of leaving a little to be desired there, leaving a little on the table.
Bottom line, you got to take care of business. And most importantly, you want to create some separation in the standings. Of note from Thursday night, the Florida Panthers got smacked around by the Vancouver Canucks. The Leafs now back in first in the Atlantic Division. They got a game in hand against the Panthers. At the Leafs Nation 401, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button here for Leafs Morning Take. All right, it's your first ever. You come from a land of gimmicks, right? Going from
Oh
WWE to
yeah.
ECW here, a land of gimmicks. We're going to play Take It or Leaf It. Are you ready? Pretty much easy. Take it's yes, leaf it's no. Good to
All
go?
right, buddy. Yeah, this is easy for us. No
This is
problem.
right up your alley, Frankie. This
Yeah,
is
we
what you
love
were
we
bred
love
for.
some shtick at TSN.
Love good stick as well. Okay,
Yeah.
number one. William Nylander will hit the 50-goal plateau for the first time in his career. Take it or leaf it, Frankie.
Ooh, okay. I'll take it. I'll take that. I'll take the bait on that. Last I checked, he was on pace for 53. That would have
51
been
now. Yeah.
so 51 now. Do I think William Nylander at some point in his career is going to touch up on 50 goals? Why not? Like Zach Hyman touched 50 goals. Like Sam Reinhart's found another gear as far as, his goal scoring ability. William Nylander has as good of a shot, as good of a release, better than Hyman for sure. Good ability to score goals. So I think Willie at some point gets 50 goals. And the fact that he's on pace for it this year leads me to believe that there's a very good chance he does.
I love Hyman getting some shrapnel from Frankie Corrado here on
By
the
the way,
show.
that's not shrapnel at Hyman. I'm a big Hyman fan.
Okay, whatever you say. I'm going to take it as well. I'm a believer in Willie Nylander. I think it's that type of year where there's a bit of sacrifice. That's going to be the big word, sacrifice. Poppy's going to sacrifice. He scored 69 times last year. He's going to sacrifice, score 45 goals, and hoist Lord Stanley. So I'm going to go with take it. Nylander's in a groove, man. He's feeling it. The numbers speak for themselves. He's on fire. So I'm going to take that over 50 goals for Willie Nylander. Number two, Max Domi will score 10 goals or more this season. By the way, he needs 10 in the last 53 games of the season. Take it or leaf it, Frankie.
I will leaf that. I think if Max Domi scores 9 goals, but gives you some production and some assists and finds a good spot in the lineup, that's fine with me. Like I don't need him to have 10 goals. He doesn't shoot the puck enough. And that's of course something that's a work in progress. And Craig Berube's mentioned that, but yeah, like it can be seen as a disappointment. Sure, if he doesn't hit 10 goals, he should be scoring more than that. He should be shooting more than that. But it just feels like it's one of those years where it's not gonna go in for Max because of the volume is not quite there. And but it's not. I don't see it as doom and gloom. Like I still think Max can bring a lot to the lineup even if he doesn't score 10 goals. Maybe I'm lowering the bar a little too much, but I didn't count on Max being a big goal scorer anyways.
Is he this year's version of Connor Brown's my question for you.
Well, that would be like if you get into the playoffs,
Who's the
that would
heck?
be good,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
he doesn't play the same way Connor Brown does.
Yeah.
Connor Brown is much more difficult to play against. He's more of a puck hound. He's more like stiffer on the puck. He's stingier. I don't know. It's different type players.
Fair enough. I'm gonna go with Leaf It as well. I don't really care if he scores 10 goals or not. Yeah, you want that production, but I still feel like Max Domi's that type of player that I want to go to war with in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I know you just talked about the way he plays, but I still like the brand, the style, the personality, the energy he brings to this roster. I think he will catch a heater. It goes without saying at some point in time. If you recall last year, took him a while to get cooking offensively, then he did. So that's inevitably going to happen. I just don't know if he's going to score 10 goals in the last 53 games of the season. The final one for you, Frankie, here, and take it or leaf it. Jake McCabe is the most important defenseman on the Maple Leafs. Take it or leaf it, Frankie.
I'm going to leaf that because the most important defenseman is Chris Tanev, because you bring in Chris Tanev because he's the best at shutting players down. We've seen it where he's done it to, McDavid at times. He's done it to the best players. And like having that guy, I think in what he brings is something the Leafs desperately needed. And I find more value in what Tanev can do. Now we're splitting hairs here because McCabe is obviously very valuable to this group, but I would give the slight edge to Chris Tanev.
You know what? We're in sabbatical on this whole thing. I was going to go with Tanev, but for argument's sake, I'll go with Riley. So I'm going to go with Leaf it too. He's your highest paid defenseman. I don't know if you caught it last night. Taking a lot of heat was Morgan Riley. It's been an up and down start, and it's crazy. We sit here on December 13th. They're still looking for a partner for Morgan Riley, man, which is kind of hilarious because we thought Tanev was going to be that guy.
It's been a long list, buddy. Myself, I think I played a few games with Morgan, so you can see some of the guys that he had to play with at times in his career. But yeah, I think Morgan's not an easy guy to play with. Like he plays an unpredictable style of game, but hopefully him and Oliver Ekman-Larsson can kind of settle in because that at one point that deep pair looked pretty good together.
Yeah, and understandable. I still think the perfect fit is a guy in Nashville, Luke Shen, who we'd love to see back in the blue and white for a third reunion here. So we'll see if that happens. Before we run here, Frankie, got to ask you about some news that came out the last couple days about the NHL allowing Italian ancestored players to play in the Olympics. Will you be coming out of retirement to play for Italy next year?
I won't. My body is too beat up, but I think if I really had to for a short tournament, I need about 12 to 16 weeks, maybe 16-week training with Gary Roberts, and we'll see where it goes.
Is there a conversation I can have with you to bring you out of this? Like, would you be open to it?
I don't know.
How sick is that, dude? You get to
Yeah.
play for Italy in
I have
Italy
my
at the
passport.
Olympics.
I got my passport while I was playing in case I was still playing at this time in my life, so I could try and play in the Olympics. But I'm too many injuries for me, buddy.
Fair enough. Imagine they just throw it on you at the end. They're like, yeah, we brought in a new head coach. His name, Mike Babcock. The
Check,
Italians like,
please. I'm out of
yeah.
here.
See you later. It's
Yeah,
time for the
buddy.
last call. Brought to you by Bet365. Open account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION, all in uppercase, NATION. Today, is there anybody specifically you're looking at this weekend from the Maple Leafs perspective? You talked about it earlier, a 4-point weekend, take care of business. Anybody you want to see cook here?
I think Austin Matthews against the Buffalo Sabres. That is always one that sticks out to me. And how about 2 Leafs wins? Like 2 Leaf wins in back-to-back games. That should be very attainable for them. They're going to be favored, and like they should be able to beat up on these 2 teams. So a Matthews goal against the Sabres, 2 wins. There we go. Seems likely.
I like it. I'm going to go with a Max Domi Apple on Saturday against Detroit. So those are our 2 picks here on Leafs Morning Take. Frankie did a great job just in leaving. There's a lot of people in the chat wondering if there could be a potential number 1 pairing in Italy of Frankie Corrado and Carlo Coliacvo. What are the chances of that happening?
Listen, if I can't come back and skate, Carlo has less chance than that. So,
Dude, when I saw this
I think
story,
our
I'm like,
days are done.
yeah, well, when I saw this story, I thought it was the coolest thing ever, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's in Italy too.
Yeah.
Again, we're biased because we're Italian. That'd be so unreal, though.
They need guys. They need guys because they got to be competitive. So, anyways, buddy, thanks for having me. I appreciate you.
Where does this rank on your list of things you've done in your broadcast career early on? High up there?
Very, very high. Yeah, a very illustrious. It's a pleasure
Thank you.
working with you, buddy.
All right, buddy. Go back to covering Lane Hudson. Appreciate it.
All right, see ya.
The one and only Frankie Corrado from TSN. He's got to run, but appreciate his time here on the show. Again, Jay Rosso is going to be back on Tuesday. So another Italian will be in the mix on Monday in the form of Dave Pagnotta from the 4th period. So if you got questions regarding the trade market, anything in general with the Maple Leafs, get those in. But very appreciative of Frankie making some time. Very busy house right now. He's got newborn twins. He's got a crazy dog. Very busy life right now. So we are very thankful to Frankie for hopping on here for 45 minutes or so here on the podcast. That's going to do it. Again, if you want the latest on Anthony Stolarz, we have you covered here over at the Leafs Nation. If something does break today where they announce the extent of the injury, Zach or I or both of us will put out a video just sort of breaking down what's transpired, what's the latest. So again, it's your number 1 spot. If you haven't done so already as well, I was hearing yesterday there's been, I think, 4 or 5 people have bought and booked their trips for the TLN Nation vacation. So they're going off the shelves now. Nationgear.ca again, where you want to check out for the TLN Nation vacation, the first ever one. We're going to Music City, man. This trip's going to be something else. So join us if you can at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Thank you to everybody in the chat. You guys were fantastic. all week long. Back on Monday to break down the weekend, to break down another week of Maple Leafs hockey. Feeling good about this team following a 3-2 victory here against the Anaheim Ducks. Thank you to producer Vic. For Frankie Corrado, I'm Nick Alberga. We'll talk on Monday. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosa. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.